Alright, welcome back guys. So hopefully you've had the time now to go ahead and select the pack that's appropriate for you. So once you've gone ahead and selected that pack, go ahead and open it up and find your displacement map in there. Okay, now we'll keep ZBrush running in the background here, but we are going to go and look for our displacement map. I've already got it preloaded up already here in Affinity Photo, but of course feel free to use the photo editing software of your choice. Okay, they're all very much the same, and the tools I'm going to be using here are pretty much universal for any kind of photo editing package. Now I should mention that your displacement map may look a little bit different to this, but essentially the key takeaway from this is you can see my zoom is at 6%. You basically want the map that has incredible detail. So here I am at 100% here, and I could be looking at the side of a cliff for all I know, okay? Because the details are so fantastic. So pick the map that has the most kind of the highest resolution in terms of details, just in case you get lots of different kind of maps in your pack, because I've seen them as well sometimes. Now having said that, however, you do want to pick the map that does have a variation of the details like this. So we can see some vertical lines going up here, we can see some kind of white paw dots, we can see the lips. You know, there's a variation, but it's not just noise, if that makes sense. Some maps can sometimes just look like noise, and I think they might be called micro maps. But then again, who knows? The industry's got several different names for the same thing. Okay. Anyway, let's get started. So I'm going to show you one of two ways to create alpha maps. Okay, or these kind of, yeah, I suppose these kind of alpha maps. All right. So first of all, let's go ahead and get started with the first way. We're going to need our layers here. We're going to need to unlock that padlock there. And before we do anything else, let's go to New. And we're going to aim to try and create a square based sort of image. Okay, so we can go for, let's go for a custom one here. Let's go for 2048 by 2048, and we'll do a nice 150 DPI. Okay, and let's see, that should be fine. Some people like to work in RGB 16, but RGB 8 I've found is always alright for me. Okay, so we've got a blank canvas there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a part of his face and turn it into an alpha brush. So let's start with the most simplest part first, the cheek. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my selection marquee tool here, and I'm just going to left click, shift and drag out a selection box to basically select a part of the cheek here, probably a good section of it as well. Okay, it doesn't really matter so much how big it is, although this is a fairly good size. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and Control C, but before we do that, there's one little thing we need to make sure in Affinity Photos to rasterize the layers first. And there we go. Although if you don't rasterize it, it could be the same in your photo editing package as well. If you don't rasterize it, it doesn't let you copy it. It's just very strange. I don't know what it is. And no, I can't explain it. But anyway, rasterize your image, get a selection square out, copy that over, and simply paste that into your new document that we created. Now you can see here, if we zoom out, we've got a massive scale here. Okay, so that's 2048 by 2048. They still can't contain that small selection we just gathered there. Okay, so let's just go ahead and we'll roughly resize this to the right size. Okay, so we've got a good selection of the cheek there, as you can see. All right, now what we're going to do here is essentially we're just going to use the color black. Okay, so if we create a new layer and we'll go to our color, we've got black selected by default. We want the hardness down to 0, and essentially we want to draw in or paint in a manual vignette around the edges. This is just to help with tiling. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll do that. We'll just start off here around the edges, but you can see here this is a bit too much of a harsh fall off, so we're going to need to go quite big for this. You're going to need to do quite a lot of, just give it quite a smooth fall off, as smooth as you can. And I will say straight away that this method used to be the old method I used to do things several years ago, until I discovered something new, but I'll show you that in a minute. But this is a good way to sort of do it as well. So you want a kind of gradient feel there, and the reason why we made it 2048 by 2048 is that even if we zoom in at 100%, we've still got a good amount of detail there. Okay, the reason why it's black on the outside is because when we throw that over to ZBrush, it's going to interpret that as an alpha. Okay, so we go to File, we hit Export. Okay, we're going to go ahead, let's select, you could select PNG, that's fine, and it does kind of crop it down to a nice size, but I'm going to select PSD just for maximum kind of compatibility. Okay, So let's go ahead and select PSD. Okay, fantastic. I'll head over to my directory. And let's go into, it's in vertex character, let's go to new folder and we'll call these alphas. Okay, because that's what they are. And under alphas here, we're going to save this one. So what is this? This is the right cheek. Okay, so R cheek, and we just call this _A for alpha. Okay, hit save. It might take a while to save because it's quite a big file, but no, it appears to have been fine. That's fantastic. Let's go over to ZBrush. Now in ZBrush, we're going to go over to our alpha square here, hit import, go back to finding where we've stored all that. Alphas, right cheek A. It's 21 megabytes, so a big difference from a 2 megabyte PNG. Okay, so let's pick a nice part of the cheek here to draw it out on. We'll do a standard brush, drag rectangle, and let's drag it out here. And you can see it's not much happening. Why? Because we haven't got enough active points. Alright, so that's a bit disappointing. Let's go over here and we'll bump them up at least once. That's fine. 1.815 million points, and you can see that, yeah, we get some good detail there, but it's still not very clear. So let's do it again. Okay, so up to 7.5 nearly million active points. Let's see what this turns out like. Intensity is arguably too high. I find the 10s tend to be nice, and I can't give you an exact number because it depends on how many layers you have, but 14 or something like that generally tends to be a good number. So let's just drag it out here, and you can see there that we've got nice skin pore detail there on the cheek. Okay, so a bit of before and after, okay. Now you might notice, if eagle-eyed viewers out there notice, that actually the cheek seem to extend a little bit there, and that's because no matter what we're doing, we're still adding a Z-add depth. Okay, so if I change this to a spray and start doing this, you can see that as I start spraying this on her head, it does actually grow. It does actually start to increase, just like it would of a normal standard brush. Okay, so that's something you've got to be a little bit aware of. Okay, but the second way we're going to create alphas, it can help with this in just a minute. So I'll go ahead and I'll show you how to do that now with another part. Alright, let's go back to Infinity Photo, and now let's take another favorite part of, actually let's do the other side. Let's do the same thing. We're taking almost exactly the same sample size, and we'll sample the other side of a cheek. Now you might be thinking, is it a waste of time to sample the other side of a cheek? And actually it's not, because the reason why we want to sample the other cheek is because you see here we've got these holy kind of pores, or kind of starfish shaped pores, but over here we don't. That's because this is very close to where the nose and the mouth start to form. You can see we've got wrinkled lines here. Now for example, if you were to basically use this texture, her right cheek, on her left cheek there, could you see that those pores would be in the wrong place? So that's the problem. Okay, so you could take our old texture map here and just flip horizontally. That's one way to do it, but I like to take a new sample size because I've got it. I may as well use it. Okay, so same procedure as last. We'll Control C, and this time we'll just go to new from clipboard. And what that's going to do, because it's a square already, you can see we created a 3820 by 3820 pixel map. Okay, fantastic. Let's go over to File. We'll hit Export, keep it as a PSD, and this time we're not going to name it R cheek. We'll name it L cheek. L cheek A. Fantastic. Save that out. Okay. Over in ZBrush now, let's go ahead. We'll import that new one. It's going to be slightly bigger file size there because it is a slightly bigger resolution. There it is. Comes in there. Now we've got a square. If we go ahead and click and drag now, oops. Let's use the drag rectangle. Oh, actually, we don't get a kind of square marking. That's quite nice. Interesting. So I guess that kind of works. I was expecting to have like a square line there, but if you do have a square line, like let's say, let me kind of replicate it a little bit here. If you have that effect at the edge of your textures, okay, there is a way to fix that. So if we go over to, if we pick up our last texture there. Okay, we go over to alpha, and we go over to modify. We've got a lot of different things we can play with here. Let's see, I always kind of lose. Okay, so the radial fade. This is a key one. If you do radial fade, have a look at this texture preview up here. if we bring it all the way to 100%, you can see it actually just feathers out the edges, okay? And you can change the amount there based upon how subtle you want it to be, okay? So it looks like maybe a value of 10 or 15 is a good kind of value, and you can obviously, you know, change the intensity of it as well and what have you, okay? That's another way of doing it. Intensity is 0. Okay, you can also bump up the contrast if you want a few more details. That might be a good idea for this because our kind of pores here look a little bit washed out, and sometimes you might want to press them for more sort of details. So for example, let's click and drag that out now. Okay, not bad, pretty good. Now, just as a rule of thumb, let's say for instance we left the contrast not at 3 but at 1. Okay, and it wasn't doing very well enough. Maybe it looked a little bit too bland, you can barely see it. So what would you do? You'd increase the Z intensity, right? Let's turn it to something crazy like this. Can you see it's still creating that relief there? Okay, so before you want to increase the Z intensity to bring out more detail, consider leaving the Z intensity the same, but going over to your alpha and instead boosting the contrast, okay, because that's going to make your alpha stand out a little bit more than usual. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll drag this out there, and you can see there that that's a pretty good, let's just get orientated, something like that. Okay, that's a pretty good foundation just for the central parts of the cheek there. Okay, that's a good way to put it there. Yeah, so sometimes it can be quite difficult to see where the detail is and which way it should be orientated. So we've got these kind of lines up here, that's closer towards the eyes. If we just go back and check our texture, yes, we've got those lines there as well, so that is closer to the eyes there. Okay, but actually it might actually be upside down. Let's click and drag up. Actually, yes, that is correct. There you go. Okay, so it does take a bit of time to try and get used to which way is what. But at the end of the day, so long as you've got the detail there, it's fine. Don't worry about it. No one's going to really notice the difference. Okay, make a big hullabaloo about it, but really, it's not that big a deal. Okay, so in kind of conclusion, I've shown you now how to go ahead and you take create 2 alpha textures from this same displacement map. So hopefully now you can see the usefulness of this displacement map. Just going to spend a bit of time here showing you what happens if you've got a skin pack brush that's a little bit more like here's some, let's use this as generic kind of skin pores. Okay, what do you do? Well, you could spend time left clicking and dragging that out, but you can see it's not going to be as effective. You're likely, all the packs I've seen, they're usually like spray based. So if you start to bring your draw size down and start to spray this around, okay, with quite a low intensity, you can see there you can actually start to create what looks like skin pore detail if you overlap it enough. Okay, and you can also change, of course, the 15 value here, and maybe play with some of this as well. Okay, this obviously looks like it's going to have a bit more radial focus there, maybe less contrast, because that does seem quite strong. There we go. Okay, so again, your mileage may vary depending upon the pack you get, but I just want to show you that's how you'd use maybe like a brush pack or an alpha brush pack instead of creating our own like we're doing here. Okay, so because ours are all basically, all would be basically drag rectangle brushes. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and change the settings back. Seamless, yeah, I mean that doesn't seem to change much there. 1.5 intensity and a value of 18 looks pretty good to me. Okay, fantastic. So all that's left to do now is essentially spend the next couple of videos going back to Affinity Photo, taking the texture from the other parts of her face and transplanting that onto our head mesh.